there is one thing that is common to all human endeavors, then it has to be stories. That's it. Like across languages, cultures, societies, religions, all social orders. Like without stories, there is hardly anything to to hold on to. You can see it in sports. You can see it in businesses. Uh, the very foundation of marketing is basically holding on to a story, to sell a story, right? And despite this very common factor, it's kind of ironic that we are terrible at storytelling. Most of us, even if you were to ask each other to share our stories, it's very difficult for most of us to coherently put together a story for ourselves, forget for others. Like maybe it's because we have a very faulty memory faculty and we don't really, you know, connect the dots very easily until unless we become the third person. It's easy for us to understand someone else's story. That's why when we read about autobiography or even a memoir, we realize that we understand the character better than the person who actually is the character. That's the paradox, right, of storytelling. Now, in the world of businesses, in the world of markets, storytelling goes a long way. The reason why today Nike is seen as an aspirational brand and not some entity that sells, overpriced shoes, or for the matter, even in the world of fashion, you take all the big names, Louis Vuitton, every one is basically selling a story, is selling something which is deeply rooted in their identity. And that's why they are able to do it so well, right? And that is how the narrative is. Even in the world of sports, which is so, you know, it's so dependent on statistics, there's a lot of myth. It's only when somebody tells you, you know what, this person, despite so many obstacles, did this or whatever, and that's when we start looking at other factors which were beyond the myth, right? Myth making, even sports is not immune to myth making because humans as a species, I feel that we are very drawn to stories and we don't really care about that blurring line between fiction and non-fiction as long as the story is good. And despite all of this, we are terrible at storytelling. We struggle a lot. uh, Obviously the writers and those in the literary field will disagree because they've learned how to manipulate human senses. But for the rest of us, most of us, I feel that storytelling is an art that is that is going out of fashion. Like, ask yourself that how comfortable you are uh, telling anything anymore. Like, we don't share stories anymore, right? The way our grandparents used to do and their grandparents used to do. So this is one of the side effects of rising content and internet penetration, I feel. But if you were to improve your your storytelling process, then how will you go about it? I think there are twofold, or should I say, a prong approach to this. One is you have to be rooted in reality. Your stories have to be very much relevant to today's reality. It's very difficult to uh, sell a story where things are not in order or things are not coherent. And maybe that's why most or a lot of the companies, especially on the startup side, you'll see that a lot of them fold within two summers. It's because they're not selling a story that is relevant. It's we or most of us, because of MBA and very business centric approach, we forget that without a story, there is nothing to hold on to. Because at the end of the day, you're not selling just a product, you're selling something more than that. You're selling a dream, you're selling an aspiration, you're selling a goal. And a lot of companies forget, or maybe they don't care about that part. They think they'll take care of that later. And maybe that is a very counterproductive way of doing things. So the first way to at least try is to be relevant. It's to be very much rooted in reality. Your story has to be rooted in reality. Yeah, at a personal level, at a professional level, it has to be rooted in reality. It has to be very relevant to your current, whatever your scenario is. Second point is to believe in that story. Is to genuinely believe that this story is good, if not great. One of the main reasons why sales force in many organizations fail is because those salespersons, they don't actually believe in that story. It's only when you put your 100% or 200% into that story that you are proud of selling that story. That when you sit at the dining table having food with your family members, you are actually proud to sell that story even to your family members, your relatives, your friends. That is important. That storytelling, that desire to embody that story is important. Why else would people spend like thousands of dollars on sneakers? Because there is a story that has been sold so well over the years, over the decades, that it has turned into $1 billion, multi-billion-dollar industry. So if you look at all these factors, all these, kind of little embellishments that has taken place, and then you go back and back and back, and then you realize that uh, the common denominator is a good story. And more importantly, the very art of storytelling. The people who sold that story so well that, take example of Apple, like how Steve Jobs sold that story, that even after a decade of his departure, people just hold on to that. A new generation has come up, but still they hold on to that story. So I feel storytelling is very critical, not just on a professional level, but also on a personal level. But most of us, we defer that and we think that it's not important. And maybe that's why during interviews we find it very difficult to answer that question. Say something about yourself, introduce yourself, because we are not at all in touch with ourselves. And if we are so so lacking, then how are we going to sell somebody else's story?